Beijing Silian hairdressing salon lies in the bustling commercial street of Wangfujing. Silian still enjoys a good reputation among the few remaining state-run barbershops. The salon usually opens at 9 a.m, but today the first customers arrived at 7:30. To meet the demand, the hairdressers arrived at 7. Wu Qing, a professor from the Beijing Foreign Studies University, arrived at the salon in the early morning. She's the daughter of the famous writer Bing Xin. Her hairdresser is the 76-year-old Wu Yongliang, who has been Wu Qing's only hairdresser since she had her first haircut here in 1978.
His craft is gained through years' careful study. He handles every detail perfectly. People's hair differs in thickness. Take me, for example. My hairline is low, and my hair even grows upward.
It's short already. You're still pulling. You want me to cut off more?
Too much hair here.
It's just thick.
My hair is uneven.
It's uneven.
I even have 2 cowlicks. It said 2 cowlicks means the mother will commit suicide. My hair was longer before, now it's shorter. Short hair is hard to deal with. He doesn't let go of each detail. He handles every detail with heart.
In modern society, people's living standard improves. It has been years since 1949. People's demands change. People used to just have their hair washed or cut shorter. Now they want to make up the deficiency with the hairstyles. The old want to look young, and the young want to look fashionable. After styling the hair, your mum can get a totally different feeling.
Her mood is also different. He assigns the right hairdresser to curl your hair based on the texture of your hair. If your hair is hard, he will send a hairdresser good at making small curls. After perming the hair, let it sit for a while and then trim it. The method varies from person to person, which I think should be the principle in everything you do, because you're facing a man, not a robot.
Hairdressing needs technique and a sense of art. Sculpture is a form of art. Actually, your face is the frame, your hair is its decoration. I use the tools in my hand to sculpt it.
It's kind of a form of soft sculpture. He has so many customers in Beijing. Young people chase after the superstars. In the past, Master Wu was our superstar.
Wu Yongliang has gained fame cutting women's hair at Silian. He's skilled at perms, trimming and cutting, and can layer his customers' hair perfectly. He is an expert at brushing and blow-drying and can hold several roller brushes at one time. After the customer's hair has been blow-dried, it is shiny, full, and has a natural look. Wu Yongliang's skills take years of practice to learn. If the basic techniques aren't applied properly, the blow-dried hair will soon be messy again. Wu Yongliang has spent 57 years at Silian. His 57 years at Silian also coincide with his 57 years in Beijing. To old Beijingers, Silian is more than a simple hairdressing salon. The most popular hairstyles all used to come from Silian. The salon used to be the benchmark for the hairdressing industry, and from the 1950s to the 1980s, it was the most exclusive hairdressing salon in Beijing. Silian used to count film actors, TV hosts, and government officials among its regulars. It was as much a part of the old Beijing style as the hats, boots, and gowns made by Beijing's time-honored brands. It's the kind of quality life old Beijingers were pursuing. Even today, as private hairdressing salons are mushrooming all over Beijing, many old Beijingers still prefer to come to Silian. These walls are full of memories and the imprints of a different time.
We had 8 customers this Wednesday. 4 are 82 years old. It seemed like they came here for a party. They were talking about their ages. I said, I am as old as them. We talked a lot about the old days. I always met old customers. I cut their hair when I was young. It's been decades.
Yes, just like us.
When did you have your first haircut here?
Yes, when I was a little girl.
A little girl?
When I was 18 or 19.
Finding the right hairdresser for your hair is a matter of luck. The shop's old regulars dwell on the past. Coming to Silian has become part of the life of many of the women who prefer to have their hair cut by Wu Yongliang, even after time has turned their black hair grey and changed them from young girls to old women. Their relationship has gone beyond that of a hairdresser and a customer. It's more a meeting of old friends, chatting and reminiscing about the past. While the rest of society is turning people into strangers, Silian is full of human warmth. It's this human connection that keeps the 76-year-old Wu Yongliang occupied and happy. This is Guan Zhesen, a 30-year-old hairdresser in Shenzhen. 1 month ago, he closed his hairdressing studio and began to travel and study across the country. Guan Zhesen is not a beginner. He threw himself into the hairdressing business when he was 15 and recently met a bottleneck in his professional development.
I met the bottleneck of my hairstyling career. My small social circle has limited my understanding on the history, technique, operation of hairstyling and fashion. Many fashion elements remain unknown to me. I want to enlarge my circle and
As a young hairdresser of the new generation, Guan Zhesen realized that excellent technique is far from enough to become a good hairdresser. A sense of fashion, personal charisma, and the ability to establish a tacit emotional relationship with the customer are the higher aims of every hairdresser. In fact, Wu Yongliang went through the same stages of professional development at Silian over the past 50 years.
When you win the customer's trust, they will come to you like a tide. Sometimes there were too many of them. I couldn't take care of all of them, and I became impatient. Even more, I was tied up, but the customer insisted on having their hair cut by me. Then I would be really irritated. Now they say I'm temperate, not as before. I say young people are more likely to lose temper. Now it's different.
I'm satisfied with his work every time.
She looks great with makeup. Look at her.
Your craft is excellent.
Don't flatter me. Put it on.
Thanks. Thanks.
See you.
See you soon.
It's your turn.
Silian is in Beijing, but the original barbers and Wu Yongliang are from Shanghai. In the 1950s, Beijing was undergoing large-scale development. The traditional service industries were also required to catch up with the times. In 1956, under the direction of Premier Zhou Enlai, a large number of time-honored shops were moved from Shanghai to Beijing. Among them were 4 barber shops: Huaxin, Ziluolan, Yushang, and Xiangmin.
Different service industries, including repairs, restaurants, tailoring, photographing, washing, and dyeing, were moved to Beijing. Sulian opened its first store in Beijing in 1956. The fellow workers would stay together after work and went to the barbers from Shanghai to learn.
At that time, Beijing's hairdressing industry was still comparatively stuck with conservative hairstyles. Perms were used, but only big curls and small curls were made. The barbers from Shanghai brought new hairstyles. They could even produce beautiful wavy hairstyles. Before long, Beijing's fashion-conscious women flocked to Sulian.
At the beginning, I worked for 8 hours. There was no break. I was 19 back then. But I was tall, so I looked older, like in my early 20s. At that time, young men always looked older than their age. Those educated young men who cared about their hairstyle came for me. I was skinny that time. Now I'm 76. Old customers still come for me. I've been cutting their hair for more than 50 years. They say I was giving my attitude back then. I was innocent. I was too busy to take care of each of them. They want to look good, so it takes time.
In the 1950s, the normal price for a haircut was 4 cents. Sulian charged 8 cents for a haircut and 22 cents for a perm. Despite its high prices, Sulian customers still flocked to the salon. Although people with lower income were reluctant to spend their money on haircuts, at the end of the year, they would go to Sulian to treat themselves. Wu Yongliang could hardly get a full night's sleep during those busy months at that time of the year. On one occasion, he cut 130 different customers' hair and did 40 perms on a single day. He could earn more than 100 yuan a month, which was good money at the time. But Sulian had its reasons for charging such high prices. In Beijing at that time, getting a haircut meant simply getting a shave, and the service was mostly targeted at men. Shanghai was the source of fresh ideas at that time. People were pursuing fashion, novelty, and quality service. Right after the foundation of Sulian, barbers from Shanghai provided Beijing's hairdressing industry with a fresh breath of wind.
Technically speaking, I'm an illiterate. I grew up in the countryside, and I didn't attend the school, although I did spend a couple of days in a private primary school. After coming to Beijing, the status as a barber improved. We got our pay 60 to 80 yuan a month. 80 yuan was equal to an engineer's pay at that time.
Private barbershops disappeared after the public-private partnership system was implemented in the hairdressing industry, and barbers became regular employees of state-run ventures. With these reforms, being a hairdresser became a respected profession. Before that, hairdressing was considered a vulgar profession, no better than being a servant, mostly reserved for people looking for a way to avoid starvation.
I spent at least 3 years as an apprentice. Nearly half of the 3 years, I was doing chores. Then, how did I improve my skills? The customers would not pay you money to ask you to do experiments on them. That's impossible. Nowadays, teachers ask the students to learn, but the students don't even bother themselves to learn. In the past, apprentices begged the master to teach. The master didn't even have time. The apprentice needs to be smart. I stood all day back then. Even there was no customer, I must exert all my strength to seek every chance to learn. We apprentices stayed together. Usually the salon closed at 7. In Shanghai, it was almost the same. After work, we hung around the fruit stands, noodle stands, and snack stands to seek targets who would agree to have their hair cut or permed by us without paying. In this way, we made progress.
The older generation says that a 3-year apprenticeship was required to become a barber. Techniques like shaving, picking, and pinching take lots of practice and observation. Like in many other handicrafts, barbering also requires a calm mind. From high officials to common people, and from eldest to youngest, once the cape is wrapped around their neck, they are simply a customer. The barber must be neither humble nor pushy. Cutting, clipping, shaving, trimming, washing, every process must be done orderly. The barber must not let the customer's social standing affect his work. While cutting hair might seem like a trivial skill, it is critical to the customer. A lack of prudence and sincerity will cost a barber his job.
When I first came here, I had no idea about the knives. There are so many of them, but I seemed deft in playing with them. There was a customer with whiskers. My senior asked me to take a try. I did it. 5 or 6 wounds appeared on his face. I was astonished. It's not easy as I had thought. My senior said he just wanted me to feel it personally. Then I started from the basic skills. I practiced how to use my wrists and how to stand.
In the long history of China, hairdressing, which became a profession 300 years ago, is considered a young profession, but hair played a role in many historical events. The most well-known one happened in the Three Kingdoms period. According to the records of the Three Kingdoms, when Cao Cao led his troops by a wheat field, he ordered to execute those who trampled over the wheat. As it would happen, Cao Cao's own horse was startled and ran into the wheat field. Cao Cao was about to behead himself, but he was persuaded by his counselors to cut off his hair instead. By cutting off his hair, Cao Cao tightened his army's discipline. This shows that cutting off someone's hair was a very severe punishment at that time.
During my apprenticeship, after wrapping the cape around, it's time to cut the hair, but you can't let the hair fall on the ground. You need to collect it on the cape, put it aside, and then start to cut again. Stepping on the hair is strictly forbidden. In whatever stage of history, the political and economic reforms are all related to braid and hair.
This is a rare video left by American sociologist Sidney David Gamble. Although it is filmed years after the Revolution of 1911, this man has kept his long braid. The Chinese started to wear their long braids in 1644, when the Qing army took over the Shanhai Pass and forced Chinese men to wear their hair in a braid and have their foreheads shaved.
At that time, the court of the Qing dynasty gave the order to cut the hair, which means the Qing army took control of the Chinese men and promulgated decrees to cut their hair. It was free of charge.
In the early years of the Qing dynasty, the court set up sheds in then Dongsi, Shisi, Yanmen, and Zhengyangmen to compel passers-by to have their hair cut. It was a singular choice you had to make between your preferred hairstyle or your life. This haircutting decree was designed to destroy deeply rooted traditional Chinese moral concepts. In traditional Chinese society, a person's skin and hair were inherited from their parents, and so it was seen as necessary to both cherish and encourage growth. It was for this reason that prior to the Qing dynasty era, people arranged their hair with a piece of square cloth and allowed their hair to grow naturally. This explains why Cao Cao was so much admired by the soldiers when he cut his hair. Even in 1953, when Zhang Youwang started as an apprentice, people still treated their hair with great care.
During a traditional haircut, a shallow basket must be used to receive fallen hair. Because hair is inherited from one's parents, It can't be left on the ground. In the event, a stray hair might fall to the ground. Under no circumstances are you to step on it. You should collect hair in a shallow basket and put it aside. The practice today of allowing hair to fall to the ground is seen as highly disrespectful.
In the early years of the Qing dynasty, haircutting was carried out by the military. To promulgate the haircutting decree, the Qing court organized special barbers and named them daijiao as officials of the 9th rank. The court furnished them with professional tools, including the haircutting shoulder pole, which featured a copper wash basin holding warm water placed on a small furnace on one end and a box stacked with haircutting tools on the other.
This shoulder pole was specially made by the court and was not featured anywhere else in the country. Haircutting was free at that time. This piece of leather was used to sharpen razors, and an imperial order is inscribed on it which says, "Keep the hair or die." The shoulder pole has a front and a back. This is a special feature which bears additional meaning. The end with a wash basin is the front and symbolizes the dragon. The other end with a stool is the back and symbolizes the white tiger.
Different from other professions, court barbers never yelled out on the streets. Perhaps it's because they wanted to distinguish themselves as government employees. Instead, they used to use an iron tool resembling a tweezer. When glanced from the bottom with a small iron rod, it emitted a sharp sound.
It has as many as 17 different names. It's also referred to as a tweezer or a baby's belly because it's outgoing on two sides. It can give off a really sharp sound. The sound acted like an order of the court. On hearing this, people were to come out onto the streets and have their hair cut. Listen to this.
From 1911, men's hairstyles changed. They no longer kept their braids. Side-parted and center-parted hairstyles were in vogue. The barber's skill set adapted from shaving to clipping. The hair clipper and the scissor took the place of the razor. The barbers slowly turned themselves into hairdressers. By the middle of the 1920s, a more sophisticated perm tool, the hairdryer, was commonly being used. The hairdressing industry was booming at that time. Many high-end hairdressing salons in cities located themselves on the prosperous streets. Service was no longer restricted to men. Perms and beauty services were being marketed to women. Some hairdressing salons even specialized in services for women.
The furnishing of a salon had to be done in accordance with a set of rules. The mirror was not allowed to touch the ground, and the dressing table was to be at least 1.2 meters above ground, because women wore cheongsams and skirts in those days. When they sat down in front of the mirror, they could be exposed. There were some rascal rickshaw pullers that intentionally used to lift their rickshaws in a furtive attempt to expose their female passengers.
Beijing is the last stop on Guan Zhesun's one-month-long journey. This experience has increased his understanding of his profession. In those days, hair was shaved by imperial decree. Today, modern hairstyles are leading fashion. Guan Zhesun is deeply touched by this change. Compared with older generations, the young are facing fiercer competition. But whether Wu Yongliang or the Cillian 50 years ago, or even the hair salons today, there is one constant that remains unchanged, and that is that hairdressing deals with people, and so therefore requires both people skills and manual artistry.
I benefited a lot from this journey. I came to see things in a different way. I feel much more passionate. more pure, more attentive. I will go on pursuing my career, but not motivated by the desire to make money. I will try to practice hairdressing with deeper understanding and stronger enthusiasm. It seems after this journey, things are not as complicated as before.
Not long after Cillian started business in 1956, Mei Langfang's wife, Hu Zhifang, had her first haircut at Cillian. She trusted the young and promising Wu Yongliang. After Mei Langfang died, the widowed Fu Zhifang withdrew herself from the outside world, and Wu Yongliang then cut her hair at her home. Things went on like this for another 4 or 5 years before swiftly coming to an end. At this juncture, Cillian discontinued its services for women. After August of 1966, Wu Yongliang began to exclusively cut men's hair in the place of women's.
The salon assistant doesn't need to be skilled like us. Hair washing and hair cutting are generally separate processes. No special skills are needed to cut hair shorter. An assistant can easily do this. The price can be as little as 20 cents, but the customer can't use the mirror because it's covered. Customers were not allowed to admire themselves in the mirror. That was considered a bourgeois perversion. The mirror was covered with newspaper. The perm machine and the hairdryer were put away. Nothing was available any longer. Women were not even allowed to wear their hair in long braids. Indeed, we still used to cut women's hair for a while, but then we were asked to stop. Because there was no place for our skills, we left the job to our assistants. We started to cut men's hair instead. It's harder. Our assistants were unaccustomed to trimming men's hair. They didn't know how to do it.
At the end of 1976, Wu Yongliang received a notice inviting him to take up women's hair again. He hadn't permed hair in over a decade and was doubtful about his skills. He'd been told that in literature and art circles, external exchange was underway and a more modern image was required for export. Women could perm their hair with permission from their employers, but waves were not permitted. With this slight loosening of policy, Wu Yongliang became busy again. The first customer he received was the film actress Tian Hua. She was going over to visit Japan. The reference letter Wu Yongliang was given introduced 4 new customers at one time. In order to obtain a reference letter and be allowed to have their hair permed in the salon, people tried to connect with people in literary and art circles. Some even offered bribes.
From 1976 till the beginning of reform and opening up, hair was permed in the following fashion. Hair clipping, hair perming, hair drying were all done by a specific person separately in a series of successions. After first drying the hair, hair was then rolled up into hollow curls and then was brushed out into full waves. Looking from behind, we used to say, a turtle were resting on the back of one's head. You couldn't tell a mother from a daughter if they walked side by side, because their hairstyles looked exactly the same.
After reform and opening up was instigated in 1978, Chinese women's hairstyles were revived once again. Women who loved fashion were not satisfied with dull and monotonous hairstyles anymore. The perm trend was revitalized and received even more popularity. Afros, long waves, and bangs with perm curls were popular again. Young women were also fond of shoulder-length straight hair, referred to as fine dried noodles. Accompanying the tide of perm and the diversity of hairstyles, hairpins, hairbands, hair treatment oils, and hair cream also emerged.
Hair dye started to be used around 1984. I once visited Nanjing barbershop in Shanghai to watch the process. I had locks of my hair in the front dyed brown and purplish red. When I went down to Nanjing Road, people were astonished and chased after me to watch my hair. My hair had more colors. People had never seen this before.
With the development of the hairdressing industry, private hairdressing salons appeared. Capitalizing on youthful fascination with fashion and variation, these private salons defined hairdressing with with different and fresh concepts. Laptops, free drinks and other services were all offered at the salon, which now successfully caters to the sophisticated demands of the new generation.
Salons have different requirements. When it comes to skill, salons are on a relatively equal footing. When you add improved service, the salon becomes a better salon. When you again introduce a more pleasing environment, you take it to another level. Of course, the best salons also cultivate lasting and resonant relationships with their customers. I can style your hair any way you want. Whether you want a messy hairstyle or a full fringe, I can do it and you will like it. The mushroom style worn by the youngsters these days was trendy decades ago. The sides can only go this far.
Different people make different choices. Fashion salons meet the requirements of their young customers, but traditional state-run stores like Cillian remain unchanged in terms of their environment and the services they offer. Since its opening in Wangfujing, Cillian has been adhering to its service concept. Though many customers find the long queues frustrating, without exception, customers who wait the queues out find satisfaction with their new haircut. The Cillian concept makes people feel at ease. In contemporary society, only in a place like Cillian can people find traditional craft like beard shaving and fine hair removing.
Young people go to the salon to have their hair cut. Hairdressers there seem to be more skillful in using their tools. That's mere form. But young people like form. Like the lady here just now. I told her to go to the salons to have her hair cut. She probably wouldn't appreciate anywhere else.
Which customers are you referring to again?
The young people of today. Normally, I don't cut young people's hair. They don't get it. But sometimes they insist.
They choose you though.
Yeah, not much I can do about that.
Wu Yongliang is 76 years old now and is still in good health. His movements are slower than before, but his skills are still unmatched at Cillian. Luckily, the Cillian where Wu Yongliang works at is state-run, and so the traditional master-apprentice relationship has been partly preserved. He has trained many apprentices at Cillian. Meanwhile, outside of Cillian, large-scale teaching has been carried out by modern hairdressers. But hairdressing as a craft itself needs to be memorized by the body rather than learnt by characters, paintings or pictures. Properly learning a trade means mastery of a skill which can only be imparted from a master, not by attending school, but by closely shadowing a master's movements over a long stretch of time. Emulating and practicing his gestures, it takes time. Whether a hairdresser is qualified or not is not judged by how much he has practiced, but by his finger movements. The traditional master-apprentice relationship is now slowly disappearing, and though it is imperfect, nothing of equivalence has come to replace it in its stead. Here is the Yuan Dynasty City Wall Relics Park in Beijing. The capital of the Yuan Dynasty was established here 600 years ago. At 7 o'clock every morning, Mr. Wang and the other hairdressers set up the chairs and arranged the tools here to wait for their first customers. In a similar manner to the traditional barbers who used to wander through the streets for customers, Mr. Wang and the other hairdressers provide simple yet practical services like hair cutting, beard shaving, and ear cleaning. Sometimes they even provide massages at the request of their customers. Some people come here to experience expert craftsmanship at 1/10 the price of a salon, while others come here to experience nostalgia, sitting out in the bright sunshine, smelling the familiar scent of soap, and having their hair shaved and ears cleaned. That's the essence of the traditional craft.